running it, but and I think it's probably an elephant in the room. I'm a main road resident on one of the roads in Hackney. I grew up on this estate actually, and with Seven Sisters Road running right through it, and I'm sort of fairly familiar with what traffic has always been like in this borough. I'm not afraid to say that the road that I live on now has actually been negatively affected. We're talking about climate safe. Actually, it's been made worse for lots of the residents there. So I've got several disabled neighbours who are now facing on a daily basis more traffic on our road. And the council's statistics say that Graham Road, I don't know if anybody knows any of these roads, Graham Road has been negatively affected, Dalston Lane has been negatively affected, Kingsley Road has been negatively affected by road closures. And it is simply the case that once the roads were closed, traffic just became more on all of those roads. And I want to know, I'm really keen to know, just because I know that it's, you know, maybe a bit of an elephant in the room. And but doesn't seem like there's a time limit for how long that this sort of extra additional harm is going to be put onto the residents of those people that live in those roads. Because we're talking about thousands of residents in Hackney, and I'd really like to know what each of the candidates for mayor propose to do about the additional traffic on some of those really important residential main roads that we live on.
Johnny, could you repeat just in case they couldn't hear online?
Sure. So the question was, what are the mayoral candidates going to do for main road residents to combat the negative elements of road closures within the borough? Is that a fair appraisal? Yeah. Yeah. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Thanks very much. So who would like to go first?
I can go. Thanks, Ollie. And I know we've met recently and spoken about this, and I also live in Dalston, so I do know what you're talking about in terms of the increase in traffic on Graham Road and Dalston Lane. I've been out speaking to residents on Graham Road recently around kind of our vision and some of the things that I've mentioned this evening about how we make sure that we're addressing the traffic across the borough and not just kind of moving it around. So we have to absolutely reduce traffic generally and make sure that there's equality in the positive impacts of the low traffic neighbourhoods. So I would, some of these things I've already said, so working to prioritise the bus movement, because on Graham Road you can just see, and Dalston Lane you can just see the bus stationary, which is just infuriating. So there's lots that we could do about looking at kind of prioritising movement, looking at a one-way system, and looking at some of the stuff that's been proposed by the Hackney cycling campaign and other kind of walking groups locally. There's lots of people thinking about how we kind of free up the bus and support people to move from the car into the bus and make that more attractive. Lots more to do around those things we've been talking about supporting people to make active travel choices. But I know, I've been speaking to lots of residents on Graham Road who are really frustrated. So there's absolutely something we need to do now. So as mayor, that would be my absolute priority, to look at how we make that better for the people on those roads.
Thank you. As I said at the beginning, I am in favour of LTNs. I think they can work, but of course, while the traffic evaporation is happening slowly, in the short term, traffic gets pushed onto the bigger roads and the main roads, and of course, people live on those roads, and it affects the air quality. People are impacted by the traffic, and that is a big negative impact in the short term. And that's why I think the key is proper monitoring of any of these schemes, seeing what the impact is particularly on air quality, and seeing whether they need to be adjusted. LTNs can work, but it's no good just implementing them and saying that's it. It's about ongoing monitoring, seeing what adjustments can be made, and listening to local people.
I think this is a point I raised in my opening statement actually, which is that time after time LTNs haven't returned a majority in favour in the areas that they're implemented, and unfortunately we have seen an increase in traffic on boundary roads, and I completely understand where you're coming from. I cycle or travel down those roads myself. I have friends who live on those roads myself, and I can see that things are not getting better, they're getting worse. One thing to point out is that actually, generally speaking, especially a clear example is somewhere like de Beauvoir. So inside the LTN, it's really quite it's amazing, it's beautiful, and it's very expensive. But actually, you get to social housing, and that's generally on the boundary roads, where it's outside of the protections that LTNs bring. And so I think a joined up approach where we look at the impact on society as a whole, when we look at the impact on communities that are often left behind and that are being left behind in Hackney, that's the only way we're going to get solutions. So I've been quite clear that I don't support LTNs. I think they're a blunt tool. I don't think they work, and they're not popular. So they might be really popular in this room, that's great, but they're not elsewhere, and the figures don't back it up. There's also another thing, which is that the council's own monitoring is wrong. So it might say that there's been a reduction in traffic. Well, actually, if you're sat stationary on Graham Road, the tubes that monitor, the two tubes that go across the road to monitor traffic, don't pick up stationary cars. And so therefore you have that issue as well. So I think that there's a big issue with the way that LTNs have been implemented, there's a big issue with the way that consultations have worked, and there's a big issue with the way that the council looks again at these issues. And if I'm elected to be your mayor, then the first thing I'm going to be doing is speaking to communities about these issues, about LTNs, because so many people speak to me on the doorstep about how they're upset or angry, or they've noticed that they've got asthma living on a boundary road whereas they never had it before. So we need to look at these issues again.
Thanks, Ollie, for your question. Really important question, and I do think that we have to listen to residents' lived experience of what they're, and that's why I was knocking on Graham Road for a second time during this campaign today. And there's a mixture of views even on Graham Road. Let's be really, really honest. Some people really like the changes, some people think that the changes have had a negative impact on them, but like the changes, would like more mitigation, more understanding of what would happen around main roads. You're sat next to Chris, the answer is fewer people driving. I'm going to give you an unpopular answer perhaps to you and some people online. The answer is not to reopen our roads. That will encourage more traffic, more people driving through the borough, and more pollution and more traffic for everybody. We've seen a 2% reduction in overall traffic in the borough. 80% of the people contravening our LTNs and school streets are not from Hackney. They do not have a registered vehicle in Hackney. 40% of the traffic coming through the borough is through traffic. If we open up all our roads, that will just go everywhere. People will be more comfortable driving through the borough. That is not the answer to these issues. It's more investment in active travel, it's more investment in public transport, and yes, it is road user charging, because and we can make also interventions around junctions. So what we did on Graham Road, we saw and heard the challenges on Graham Road, and we altered the timing of the lights, we expanded the bus lane protection, and we started to green that road and think about more opportunities along that road to green it and humanise it. That is how you make all of our main roads better. There is also two final lights in this debate, that there are more social housing on main roads than in LTNs. It's a fundamental lie. Go to Hoxton West, go to Frampton Park, go to our big estates in Hackney Downs, go to traveller sites there that have been protected, and also the diversity of our borough as well, in inside and outside LTNs. There is no punishing poor people, there is no punishing people in social housing, and there's no punishing people of global majority. It is just a fundamental lie in this debate, and it's been proved from the start. What we need to do is work together as a community to reduce traffic through our borough and the impact on all residents, whether they live on main roads, in LTNs, or want to live in an LTN as well, because there have been deputations to full council saying, won't you stop this rat running through my roads in Clapton? We have no answer before we introduced the LTNs in Clapton and Homerton to that question. Now that traffic is not on those people's roads, and we've seen that 2% reduction, and my promise is to reduce it 10% overall if we're elected.